a moment to switch off our mobile phones, please. Or your mobile phones, I should say. Please. So you're all very welcome here this evening. I had a great turnout to see Dr. Clements back here in Dublin, and great to see so many people interested in doing something about their health and making a few changes in their health. So what I wanted to talk to you just very briefly myself about is that most of us know what to do with our health, what it takes. We know what a healthy living entails. We know, if I was to ask you 5 questions, can you give me just 5 answers as to something you could do to improve your health? Anybody? Juicing? Great one. Somebody else?
Clean water.
Clean water, yeah. Great. Exercise.
Fresh air.
So we got the 5. So it's very simple. We know it. We know this stuff already. But nowadays we make it all very complicated. And I'm tired telling people, keep this simple. Eat the food as Mother Nature intended, and it's that simple. And so, how many of you realize that food actually kills more people than smoking or alcohol-related diseases? And is it any wonder that it kills so many people when now, here in Ireland, we have, in 2012, 1 in 5 breakfasts comes from McDonald's. So this is startling kind of statistics. Do we think ancient man evolved on this stuff? This is quite famous picture, I'm sure most of you know. But ancient man didn't live on foods that were sugar-free, laden cornflakes weren't developed, Pringles, things. Look at anybody in the supermarket nowadays and look at their shopping basket, and it doesn't resemble anything that Mother Nature has given to us. So we need to look at the foods we're eating. And as you know, this is what's on our supermarket shelves in Ireland nowadays. Last year, Philip Boucher-Hayes did a program on what Ireland is eating. And he discovered that we are eating mountains and mountains of processed food. And in my time of teaching, I have seen the age of people get younger and younger and younger with cancer, which now we're seeing on my program, I'm seeing people in their 20s. So this is the knock-on effects of eating this kind of food. So here I have, and any of you that have been to my seminars before will have seen these. These are bread rolls. Some of these should be labelled with caution. Some of these I have dating back to 2006. So there's no sign of mould on them. Rats don't even eat these food. How many of us in the audience have eaten this type of food? Come on, show your hands now. So a lot of people have done this. And we think that's only a bread roll. It's not going to harm you that much. It's not that, these little muffins I have since 2006. So imagine the preservatives that's in this food that it can last that length of time. So don't let any of you go off with them because they're my private joy. So if we eat this food, is it any wonder we're getting sick? Is it any wonder that the room here this evening is filled with people with arthritis, with cancer, with heart disease, Parkinson's, you name it, we have it here this evening. And weight loss and all the things. So it's obviously time for change. But I understand, I'm a mom, I understand when you're busy and all of these things, it is hard to get the balance right. But when you eat better, you feel better. But nowadays we are confused whether we should eat dairy, whether we should eat meat, what type of meats we eat, is fish okay, what oils are good for us, bad for us. Well, it's a lot of confusion with people nowadays. So, and as I said to you, it's really difficult to get the balance right. If you're working, you're coming home, you have children, you have all of these things, trying to balance healthy living gets well shoved down the list of priorities. And it has to be your first priority, because if you don't have your health, you don't really have anything else. So I'm absolutely delighted to have Dr. Clements here with us this evening. And over the years that I've come to know him, which is nearly 13 years now, I have seen nothing but compassion in this man. He gives so freely of his time and so generously of his time. He could so easily have spent 2 hours with you here this evening. Instead of that, he's here from 6 o'clock to meet all these people individually to give them help. So a guy who totally walks his talk, believe you me, I've prepared food for him many a time, and I know the way he eats and practices what he preaches. Because very often we collect information, but it's not enough to collect it. We have to actually speak louder than words. You have to put it into practice. And that's what I discovered 13 years ago after I went to a lecture, much like you this evening, the way you are sitting here this evening. I had just come off and had my second brush with, not a brush, but my second bout of cancer, and had chemotherapy, radiation, done it all, and went to Dr. Bryan's lecture, and it changed my life completely. Because I knew, I didn't like what he was saying. I didn't like that I just got used to making carrot juice and apple juice, and I thought I was doing the perfect thing, and he said no fruits. I hated the guy at that time, because he was taking away all the sweet things, all the sugary things from me. But in my heart, I knew what he was saying was right. And I implemented it, and the more I got into it, the better my health has got. And they say, you know, people are living proof. Well, I'm here 13 years later to tell you that this actually works. We see it on my program that I give down in Cork. We see the people where they, if they get involved, and I have a beautiful young woman here this evening. Her name is Debbie. And Debbie came along and she said, I actually thought when I was on your program, I can't do this. I don't know where you are, Debbie. Where are you? There she is. And she said, I actually thought, no, this is too tough, I can't do it. And she went home and she surprised herself. She was able to sort it out straight away. So it's not just the like of me, but you do have to be determined, and your health is your wealth. So, you know, it's a wonderful thing if you can get into it. As I said, my greatest pleasure I've become great friends with this man, and it's a great pleasure for me to introduce him to you here this evening and allow him to impart this information to you. So enjoy, Dr. Bryan Clements.
Isn't she great? Give her a giant hand. In the heck, as I wake up today, I look out and it's snowing. Honest to God. It's not bad enough it was cloudy and cold all winter, and the spring comes and it has to snow on us. You guys must have done something wrong this year. You know what's really interesting is how the world is slowly but surely waking up. And I see this because I travel the globe. This is the very end of a 2-week lecture tour that I'm doing. And people are starting to recognize that over the last several generations, we've become lost. And let me review how that happened so that maybe you have a little bit of understanding of why you're confused. It was 4 or 5 generations ago where all of us would have been living on a farm. Let's start with that. Everything was organic. Believe it or not, your entertainment was your children, your family, your friends, your neighbor. There was no such thing as radio or television or cell phones or laptop computers, no interference. There was heart, soul, and health. And then all at once, the industrial, sinister elite came in from the cities and said to you, little boy, how much are you making out here? How many euros are you making a year on the farm? And they probably said back then, in the mid-19th century, 200-300 euros a year. And he said, well, you come in, I'll give you 400 euros a year. And seduced you into Dublin. And put you in a ghetto. And yeah, you made an extra 100 a year, but you started to lose your soul. You lost your way, you lost your direction. And families started to be under pressure. They never were in the history before, where literally husbands and wives were at one another because the poor husband was working 12 hours a day. The wife was taking care of the 10 or 12 children. And families started to break apart. And then on top of all of that, they realized they couldn't feed you out of a farm with fresh food anymore, so they had to process things. They had to can things, enrich them with sodium. And then as the insanity grew and the snowball kept moving rapidly, they started to put chemicals in. They came up with a wild concept, the petrochemical industry, that we could grow more food if we poison it with pesticides, fungicides, and herbicides. And that was a lie, because we grow yet less food. And the soil is so depleted that 20 years ago there was an international gathering in Brazil, the Earth Summit, where Ireland and 170 countries attended. And back then, 20 years ago, they showed that in less than a century, nearly only 50 years, that 90% of the topsoil on the earth was abolished by the use of chemical farming. And we wonder why we're lost. And now your entertainment is, after you're exhausted and don't know your children and don't know your family, is television, where they get right into your head and get your pockets opened and start pulling stuff out of it. And we wonder why we're sick. You know, it's a plague today. It's crept up on us, it's seemingly slowly but surely, but in my perspective, after more than 4 decades of doing this work, it's rapidly moving. My government, back in December, on the 18th, they always give you these grim statistics when people have their mind on other things, like Christmas. They said, now the #1 killer of our babies below 5, infants to 5-year-olds, is brain cancer. More than accidents, more than anything else, brain cancer is the #1 killer. This should shock us. This should appall us, that you have, in this country, similar statistics to what we have in the United States. You're riddled with arthritis. It's anticipated if you live long enough, you're going to have arthritis. Look at the cancer rate. You go back to your grandparents, if you're my age, or great-grandparents, it was virtually non-existent. And today, it's half of you have cancer. Where does it end? They stick you on antidepressants because you're out of touch and unhappy. And that doesn't heal you, that suppresses it, and the problem gets bigger. And we have got to realize that why the Irish people survived after all the centuries of oppression is because we kept our hearts and we kept our souls, and we kept our vision and we kept our spirit. And sadly, I don't see that here in 2013. You're just sheep like we are in the United States now. You have been trained to consume, and you're good at consuming. And the reality is, it's time to realize that the only consumption you have to do is your own heart and soul back again. You've got to take charge of your life, you've got to take responsibility on every level, and you've got to use some damn common sense. Which I was lucky because I was brought up an Irish Catholic. We had common sense in those days. It seems to be completely absent now with the younger generations. And the fact of the matter is, what I'm telling you today is uncomfortable because you know I'm telling you the truth. This is straightforward and it's real. And when I've worked with thousands of people who have recovered, how they've recovered is not some magical process, but it's a process of taking themselves back, learning to respect their lives, and as hard as it may be to change your diet because you're addicted to garbage and waste, you do it because you like yourself enough to do it. You honor yourself as a father, as a mother, as a husband, as a wife, as a child. And you do what's right. And that's the time we're in at this point. You don't wait for your governments to make magic come, because they're not going to do it. The only magic they may come is for corporate profits today. And that's a global plague. Don't think that there is any party that doesn't somehow have to give part of their reality away at this point. Because we're no longer run by politicians, we're run by corporations. When they make laws that take away your rights to get healthy in any way that you possibly can get healthy, that's a criminal act, in my opinion. And it's time that we sit at a giant round table. I'm not one that believes there's only one way to get anywhere. I think there's a multiple of ways to get somewhere, and we have to cherry pick. We have to see what the best of medicine is, and cherry pick that. The best of complementary health care, and cherry pick it. And get back to a point where we leave our egos at the door and our wallets at the door, and we ask, what do we really have to contribute that we know works? If we don't go back to people, patient-based, not profit-based, we are the most uncivilized group of humans who have ever lived in the history of humanity, in this so-called civil Western culture that we live in today. And this has all happened in 100 to 150 years, starting with our neighbors with the Industrial Revolution in London. Today I was reading a little bit of the book that I'm rewriting on belief, and a little bit of a book from Dr. Oppener. And he talks about the effect that consuming dairy and meat have on the planet. And even if you loathe yourself and hate it yourself, if you have any care for your children, and God forbid your grandchildren, you better stop eating meat and dairy for that reason alone. I didn't realize some of these statistics as knowledgeable as I perceive myself as. That in 50 years, we went from 15% of the planet's having rainforests to 2% now. That every time you eat a hamburger, listen to what I'm saying to you. One hamburger, I'm not talking about a 5-pound steak. Do you see this stage up here? That's how much land it takes to make one hamburger. And every day, hundreds of thousands of acres are being destroyed down in South America and Africa and around the world so that we can have our fast foods and our chips and our fish. Most fish that you're eating here in Ireland no longer come from the great seas of the north, where they're so polluted at this point. I report it in my book, Killer Fish. They were stunned 5 years ago when they tested fish way out in the most pristine water off Ireland. And they found out that those fish were as polluted as in the Channel at this point. But what we found when I was doing research for Killer Fish is most of your fish comes from China's fish farms. And most of what you're eating are very low quality fish that actually contribute to heart disease, strokes, and cancers. In my book, I report that fish oil causes 2 times more colon cancer if you take it. And the alternative doctors are telling you fish oil is a good choice for you. So the world is a lot of nonsense, deception, half-truths, and moderation today. And what we have to do is stand up and get to where we need to be. This isn't lollying along. We're at the edge of the cliff, we're ready to fall off. Get your ass up and do something about it. So we're going to start now by talking about a balanced life. Your life has to be balanced. It's not all about food, but food is incredibly important. As an example, if I took all food away, you wouldn't be here in this lecture 3 months from now. You'd be at your wake somewhere. So food is important. But why you eat food is because you want to fuel a life worth living. Now, if you don't have a life worth living, what are you alive for? Just to take up space and breathe? I hope not. To sort of be semi-comfortable and have creature comforts? Let's hope not. Let's hope you're here to give. Because the one thing I've learned over my short 60-some-year life is that if you don't give, you're not alive. If you can't contribute, you're not alive. And so what is it you're here to give? What is it you're here to give? And you give yourself that answer, and then you're going to eat the right food. You got to exercise. Not good enough just to eat food. I had to learn that the hard way. I hated exercise. I thought all I'd have to do is eat this raw organic food and I'd be healthy. I became skinny as a mage. I looked like a banshee running around in the dark at night. If you should have seen my damn mother, I came home to Claire Daly, from Claire, actually. And I said, Mom, I'm on the healthiest diet I've ever been on. She looked at me and she thought, what? The kids went off the deep end now. And so basically I realized that the body was always being built, the muscles and the aerobic, because we were farming our lands. We were out on clean, pristine, beautiful days, breathing healthy air. And now we stopped and we use our finger on the clicker for the TV. That's the only muscle we have developed over here. And we got to start doing that again. And you got to get back to God. And I'm not telling you what brand. I'm telling you, you got to get a little spirituality in your life. I've seen every brand work. I hope that doesn't offend you. And if it does, you shouldn't have been here tonight. But bottom line is, you got to get God into your life. Because when you realize that you're not alone, that there's a bigger part that you're part of, that we're a thread in the tapestry of life, let me assure you, it makes it a lot easier for you to get back on track again. A lot easier to stand up straight and say, gee, I really do have a purpose. I really do have a reason. I really do have other people and other parts of nature that are here to help me. So we talk about food. So let's get to the most important part of food. A rock has nutrition in it. Can I digest it? The answer is no. And you're going to learn here a little bit later that 90% of the supplements on the market you cannot digest. And all the meat you've been sticking in your mouth, that means fish, chicken, pork, red meat, is not digestible by the body. And dairy food is not digestible by the body. So how are we going to eat food that digests? Well, go back to where all life comes from. In the next 10 seconds, I'm going to give you all the lesson you will ever need on nutrition. And if you need more than this, you are too cerebral. Every drop of life on this earth comes from the sun. Would anyone like to stand up and disagree with me on that? Okay. There's protons that start in the center core of the sun that take 100,000 years to come from the center core out to the surface of the sun, and then 8.5 minutes to get from the sun to you on the planet Earth. Protons. They are captured on the leaf of a plant. The leaf of the plant has the most protein, the most vitamins, if grown in good soil, the most minerals, the most essential fatty acids, and the most trace minerals. The leaf of a plant. 10 seconds again. What should we be eating? The leaf of a plant. How many of you here have reverse disease on the program? Please stand up for everyone now, eating this way. Everyone in the room, stand up. Don't be shy, I know you're Irish. There's a lot of you here have reverse disease. And look at these people and ask them what they're eating. I can tell you, leaf of a plant. This guy reversed cancer on the program. Leaf of a plant. What have I been eating for 41 years? Leaves of a plant. What did I raise my 4 children on? Leaves of the plant. When I train Olympic athletes like Venus Williams, leaves of the plants. Reverse lupus, by the way. Given 5 years to live, never play tennis again. She won Wimbledon, she won the Olympics, and she's playing again because she's eating leaves of the plant. She walked into my office and said to me, crying, at the end of the 3-week program, I went to what was perceived as the top nutritional scientists, top doctors, and top trainers in the world, and not one of them told me anything even vaguely close to what you're telling me. As a matter of fact, they all told me the opposite of this. Why was I so foolish to believe them all those years, decades? By the time she was a little girl, they were training. I said, honey, the world is completely the opposite of where it should be today. Because it's not about people, it's not about patients, it's about profit today. So you need to eat the leaf of the plant because that can be digested into the cell and it has the most nutrition in it, it has the most life force in it, and it actually takes those protons and converts them into usable energy in the human body. Well, this is a quick one. Now, this is what your cells look like. Now, your cells are literally 100 trillion cells in your body. Isn't that amazing? Whenever you feel like you have a recession going on here in Ireland, get over it. Now, 100 trillion cells. You go to the banker and say, I don't need your damn money, I have 100 trillion cells. My liver alone has a good percentage of those. My brain, what's left of it, by the way, has a good percentage of those. But the cell needs, at the top there you're going to see oxygen, needs water. Protein is actually what holds a cell together. It's sort of like the framework on a house. You ever see them build a house? They take the 2x4s, they bang them together, that's the protein. And then you have vitamins, and that's the covering of the cell. That's actually what you see covering it here. And as you see in the Irish people as we get older, Anglos, because we're malnourished from vitamins our whole life, we hit the side of a table or something and we start to bleed and we get blue. That's because of long-term malnourishment. We go to tribes of people and indigenous people all over the world, they're 90 years old, they never have any of that problem. Why? Because they've had vitamins throughout their life. Then you have minerals, and minerals are sort of the electric wave that moves through the body, and the fuel for the cell, one of the most important fuels for the cell, is essential fatty acids. And you don't get that from fish unless you want heavy metal toxins, unless you want cancer, unless you want to clog your arteries, because, by the way, most fish oil has far more saturated animal fat in it than it has omega oils. And by the way, the average fish oil and krill oil today has 11 times omega-6 to 1 time omega-3. What that means is more heart attacks, more strokes, etc. What we require in a balance like you get from chia seeds or sprouted flax seeds is 1 time omega-6 to 3 times omega-3. When understanding these principles, it is imperative that we consume only pure and life-filled nourishment. Now, the second thing you have to know about nourishment is that you don't only want the nutrients that build the cell that I just explained, you want the energy in the food. Now, does it make a bit of sense to any of you if you cook a food that has no energy in it? Let me make it in a way you'll understand it. Since April should be here, I don't know where it is, but it should be here soon. And you're going to go out and you're going to plant a garden. And just before you take your seeds, I say, hey, give them to me. I'm going to cook them. And I stick them in the oven and I cook them and I hand them to you. Will you be foolish enough to go plant them in the ground? Why? You'd wait all year until October and nothing's going to grow. So how are you so foolish that you take food and cook it and think you're going to grow from it? Does that make a little bit of sense to any of you? No, I hope so. I know that we're a little brain dead. I know that we're addicted. I know you've been conned by commercial interests that convince you that cooking's better than not cooking. That chemicalizing your food is not, that we shouldn't breastfeed, that formulas are better than mother's milk. That you really should eat meat since you're not a carnivore. That dairy is a great thing to build bones, where study after study shows, I'm writing a book now on dairy, by the way, that if you want osteoporosis or arthritis, take dairy food. A diet rich in raw, fresh vegetables, sprouts, and juice feed your cells and put the body into an alkaline environment. The other thing we've learned over the nearly 60 years that Hippocrates has been doing our work is that if you are alkaline, meaning that 80% of your body should be alkaline, your bloodstream, 20% acid, and you don't have to be a scientist or a chemist, that this just happens if you eat these sprouts and vegetables. You're going to be far less likely to age, far less likely to get a disease, and far less likely to die early. Does that sound good to any of you? How many of you want to die early? Raise your hand. Some of you in pain probably almost put your hand up. Isn't this cute? Our sprouted seed, the real power of food. Now, how many of you realize when you go from a sprout, a seed, I should say, to a sprout, the average increase in every one of the nutrients is 8 times. Now, to be honest with you, that being there, even if you have a monstrously strong digestive tract, it's almost impossible for you to digest. You know that, right? How many of you ever recognize after you eat a lot of beans, you don't want to be around folks for a while? Or if you're uncouth, you do. Or people you don't like very much. But bottom line is it becomes quite digestible, and 8 times more nutrients actually come from that bean. You know, when I was a kid, being brought up Catholic, the good thing Catholicism taught me is compassion and sharing and giving. And I'll never, ever stop thanking Catholicism for that. And I was given an opportunity to go down into countries that people were starving. And we were actually taking 50-pound bags of surplus grains and producing 500 pounds of incredibly nutritious food out of those. And we have people starving around the world today. Sad. Now here's some of the science on it. For years people have said, oh yes, Hippocrates and about his science. So now, in the last few years, I've just been going way overboard on writing science. Matter of fact, I'm probably the most prolific science writer on the subject of nutrition in the world today. I've completed one series of books, slowly it's being published, called Food is Medicine. This is recently 300 studies that were done on sprouts. Now here's what we know about sprouts. The seed itself is good, but look what happens in numbers. It goes from 2%, 3-day sprout, and then look what happens here. The more you sprout it, the higher it goes up in particular phytochemicals. Now let me explain what a phytochemical is. A phytochemical is a discovery that occurred in 1948. In 1948, they realized that there were elements in all raw food, plant-based food, that literally were chasing, when they looked at it on a petri dish in a microscope, cancers, viruses, bacteria, etc. When they first saw it, they thought, gee, we must be going wacky. And they had to bring other people in and say, you see what we're seeing? And they all said, yes, we see it. Now, most of you are old enough to remember this, and if you're not, I'll give you some history here. That was around when I was born, that time period. Now, we didn't want anything to do with old-fashioned stuff. We used to call it folk medicine and we were part of the jet set and the jet age, and science was going to take over, and chemistry is going to save the world. And we really all believed that nonsense, to be honest with you. And nobody did much about it until the 1990s. In the 1990s, the pharmaceutical industry started to realize people are getting fed up with us. They started to realize when we do a 1-minute commercial, 45 seconds is the side effects. Take Barunki. Your eyeballs may pop out. Your teeth may explode. Your toes may fall off. Your colon may come out. You ever notice that? And always, now we realize 8 out of 10, fatality is one of the potential things you get from Bogologia. But we seem to take it because if you don't have yourself and don't have your values and virtues and you're lost and confused and don't know what to do and don't know who you are, you're willing to go to your death with people you don't know. So the reality is we didn't do much, but they realized that people were getting fed up with medicine, so they said, next generation, we're not going to be able to sell all this nonsense. So we better start doing some research on plant-based food. And now they've actually helped us all. So I can teach this to you. They spend every single year billions of dollars giving me information and data on why what we do works. Isn't that amazing? Now, they're not doing it for that reason. They're not good-natured people writing checks for millions. They want to create products and sell you 1,000 euros a month. That's really why they're doing it. And by the way, a little secret, you'll know it before then, it's not going to work. Because when they look at the raw plant-based food, it has all this life force and energy in it that once they process it, cook it, and put it into a chemicalized pill form, it's not going to have the same effect that they found in living plants inside of laboratories. Don't tell them that, because they're giving me good data at this point. And so 300 studies have shown us that sprouts, and particularly broccoli sprouts, by the way, and this type of sprout kills cancer more effectively than anything they've ever researched in history. First study was done at 92 at Hopkins, one of the big medical, it's a Jesuit school, by the way. And my daughter went to a Jesuit school, some of the best education in the world. Our new Pope, as you saw, is a Jesuit. Close to 300 scientific papers have been published, rich in broccoli, Brussels sprouts, kale. But the sprouts themselves are amazing. Now, these are what they do. Down here, not so interesting to you, but the scientific terminology. So the broccoli sprout actually has all of these different phytochemicals in it. And enzymatically, they break down the cancers. They actually go in and kill cancers. By the way, if you have ulcers of any type, these are also going to be very effective on ulcers. Look at what you also find in these sprouts. Curcumin, which is interesting, an anti-inflammatory. Now, we didn't know that until 1992. And lutein, that helps what? The eyesight in a broccoli sprout. Vitamin B12. Carotene. 70 years ago, Dr. Norman Walker told us that carotene prevented every form of disease. And he was right. Now in the 21st century, we publish this and show it. What we do know from all of this type of research that's going on is this. Consume more vegetables in general. Specific vegetable consumption. Cruciferous, you know why they call cabbage family cruciferous? When you cut them open, it looks like a cross. Isn't that interesting? Inside. So next time you open the cabbage, cut it, it looks like a cross there. And the top of all is the broccoli, with cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, etc. I'll give you a great Irish story. 35, 40 years ago was the first time I came to Ireland and I spoke. You know, all of 8 people showed up in Dublin. And I did a whole day conference. And at the end of the day, you know, the Irish are very quiet most of the time until you get us going. And somebody stood up and said, well, how the hell are you going to sprout Brussels sprouts? So the whole day they're thinking of me. I was thinking Brussels sprouts. It's the only time I've ever heard of sprouts before. More pronounced at certain organs. So what we see with these type is that it takes care of lung cancers incredibly well and respiratory problems. So if you have, for instance, fungal infections, viral infections a lot, just by consuming some broccoli sprouts in your diet constantly. I'm going to give you some other ones. Gastrointestinal, colon, stomach, liver cancers, reproductive organs. You know, this is why we see a lot of people who have breast and prostate cancer able to recover. And these studies were so impressive that the 2 cancer doctors, renowned research doctors in these studies, they came up with a name called phytochemo. It means plant chemo. And on 2 occasions I had the privilege to speak to these men. One had been a researcher for cancer for 54 years. He looked me in the eye and said, nothing has come even close to killing cancer like what we found in the cruciferous family. Sulforaphane is the plant-based chemical that is developed in that. And it multiplies by 48 times when you sprout it. So broccoli is great. You want 48 times better effect? Sprout the broccoli. 40. So they came up with the name chemo, phytochemo. I said, you mean to tell me that most of your 50-some years of research has been on chemo? He said, yes. He said, I wish chemo had even a vague resemblance to the effect I get from broccoli sprouts. Now, how is it you don't hear that? Cruciferous vegetables offer a scientifically valid approach to detoxify the body. That's good for everyone. Cancer prevention and possible treatment. Antiviral and antibacterial effect. Blood pressure lowering. They found that the average reduction in blood pressure after 30 days of consumption of 1 ounce of broccoli or cabbage sprouts a day was actually 10 to 20 points, depending upon the age of the person. Nothing else was changed, by the way. All they did is add those foods. Can you imagine? You got off the meat. How do you think you have high blood pressure? You get on meat, you get on dairy food, and you get under stress. And you sound familiar to anyone? You are what you eat. Is your refrigerator a morgue or a garden? I want you to really look at that. You better ask yourself that damn question. Because most of us have a morgue. I remember before I started all of this, I would actually hold my nose when I'd open the refrigerator. And it didn't register with me in the head in any way. And I said, gee, that's an odd thing, because why? That's on my mother's refrigerator, my grandmother's, everyone I knew. You know, amazing stuff. And I remember when I was a kid, we'd eat these, like, sausages, and they'd fry them in butter. You know, we don't know how to do anything here without frying it in butter. And when I didn't like it, they would throw sauerkraut on top of it. And the corned beef. How many of you remember the corned beef? Oh, that was really lovely. It used to make me sick to my stomach. They put extra salt on it. Ah, go on, it's good for you. Take some more. I'd be gagging. And I became a criminal hiding food. That's how I first got into my criminal activity. How many of you had to do that? I had to hide the food on my lap until they busted me. And then they made me sit at the table for 2 hours until I ate all this garbage. And it was like amazing. My body was saying no, but they weren't. So when we open that refrigerator, look at the right side there compared to the left side. Does that look appealing to you? Why we need the booze is we're out of it by the time we eat all that garbage. You have to pass out at night. You don't even want to deal with anything. Look at how pretty that right side is over there. Need to look at the food we eat. Where do you get your protein? Boy, have they done a good job on your head with that. Now, how many of you think I look like I'm protein starved? I look like I'm protein starved, any of you? Today I was at the gym over here for 2 hours lifting incredibly heavy weight. That's what you do when you eat real protein. You want to become feminine? You want to become masculine if you're a woman? Eat meat. Because what we know today is that meat without being polluted makes men feminine and makes women masculine. But today, when they add the extra attractive hormones in it to puff up the meat so that they can sell the pounds for more money, you become real feminine or real masculine. And today we see it in some interesting ways. For the first time in human history, and this is a miracle in and of itself, there's 2% more women or girls being born than boys. We anticipate by the year 2025, there'll be 5% more. That's how rapidly it's moving. They did a study in Denmark and looked at the penile size of boys in one generation. They reduced by 1/2 of an inch. That's a dynamic amount in 25 years, if you think about it. And you look at women today, they're becoming more masculine because when you get more estrogen from all this garbage they pump into the environment, you literally, in your body, create more testosterone. And so when you see the men walking around carrying the bags now, you'll know why it's happening. And here we go. So the sissies out there are going to say, men need meat. No, wussies need meat. Men need broccoli. Let's look at the difference with this one. So here's broccoli. Now this we didn't make up, by the way. This probably came from your government statistics here. They never talk about it, though. Because the meat industry has a big lobby, I know. I was down here to talk to your cabinet years ago. That was quite an interesting talk, by the way. Per 100 calories, broccoli has 11.2 grams of protein. We come down here to steak, the most notable form. When I was a kid, I needed massive amounts of steak, trying to build muscle. All I was building is my femininity at that point. Look at that. It has 5.4 or 1/2 of the protein. So, you're going to have to change your mind on this stuff. You're going to have to change your mind because the real numbers are there. What are the highest protein foods in the world? Blue-green algae, green algae, sea vegetables, and sprouts. So when I get the real big bodybuilders, what do I feed them? Meat. I feed them what I just said to you. If I cut out dairy, will I get enough calcium? Another big job they've done on you here. The dairy lobby down there here in Dublin is really a big lobby. All over the world, that's a big lobby, by the way. When I talked to my wife, who's from Sweden, I talked to my Russian friends who were actually growing up in communist Russia. I said I was stunned to find out that they gave them free milk. Now, how do you think they can market to you better than giving you something free, getting you hooked on it, and having your teacher say, if you don't drink it, you're going to crumble. Your bones are going to crumble. I was so frightened of not taking milk when I was a little boy that I actually had a biblical image in my mind of Sodom and Gomorrah and the temple falling if I didn't take milk. So it must have been said to me by the nuns, God knows how many times every week, because I was frightened not to take milk. How many of you relate to that one? And then they con you. They say, oh, well, you know, you really want some acidophilus, take yogurt. You want to throw your bacteria off? Take yogurt. You want more cancer? Because what we've learned, with no question now, is the #1 food cause of cancer is not even meat. It's dairy. Casein in dairy. 4 days ago, I was at a major conference addressing 2,000 people, medical conference, in the home country of our founder, Anne Wigmore, Lithuania. And we're on our way there, Dr. Campbell, Dr. Esselstyn, and Hippocrates, to put together a university curriculum for undergraduate, graduate, and then medical degrees, where medical doctors in the next 10 years, hopefully, will get out and be living food medical doctors certified. And When you look at the amount of research, I never recognized this until about 2 months ago when we started to think about this, that we alone have done. Each and every one of these organizations, not me, I'm only in my 60s, but these men, for over 50 years each, and Hippocrates for over 50 years, have 150 years of plant-based nutrition with the most vivid science ever conducted in the history of nutrition. So we've got the curriculum together at this point. And what we do know is that every study that is legitimate, not paid for, conducted, and sealed by the dairy industry, shows you that dairy causes osteoporosis, that dairy causes rheumatoid arthritis, that dairy causes cancer. Because who do you think does studies? You know what we call most studies today? Checkbook science. Let me say it slow so you get it. It's called checkbook science. And here's how it works. I'm the scientist, you're the guy with the money. The average study today for 5 years begins with 15 million euros. You come to me with a $15 million check, you say, scientist, here's what I want you to show me. Here's what I want you to prove. I'll be back in 5 years or 2 months or 1 year, and this is what I expect you to give me. Now, that's how it works. If you think there's some good-natured guy writing 15 million euro checks and telling you to do what you want with it, you might as well be at Disney World tonight, not at this lecture. Because in reality, that's how science, quote, works today. And so we know the answer before we start the study. And the answer is always for the corporation benefit that pay for the study. If it wasn't for governments around the world having a little bit of ethics left, they wouldn't even tell you that your eyeballs would pop out and you may die from the drug you take. They force them to say that. But the reality is they're not tough enough with dairy, they're not tough enough with meat, and they're not telling you that the overwhelming reason that we're physically ill today is because of meat and dairy consumption. They're not telling you that 50% of the world's degradation, the planet is dying, is because of dairy and meat consumption. And it's not sustainable. It is not sustainable. We realize with the population the way it's growing, listen to this closely, by the year 2030, that we will need 2 planet Earths to sustain the level of population at that point. Now, how are we going to get 2 planet Earths? It's an impossibility. How many of you realize, I report this in my book, Killer Fish, and if you're on our mailing list, you may have gotten the magazine, that we anticipate with the top oceanographic scientists on the planet today, that by the year 2050, the oceans will be dead. We have lots of reasons we may perish, by the way. That's a good one. How many of you realize that the bees are disappearing in the world today? And the only country in the world that's done anything about it, thank God, is for the French. Some people don't like the French, I like them. They get things done. You know what the French did? When they realized the bees were dying and their crops were not going to be pollinated, that they took tractors and they drove right into the center, Champs-Élysées, and down around the Parliament in France. And they said, we are going to stay here, we're going to paralyze this city until you call Monsanto in Germany and tell them to stop putting that damn pesticide in that's killing the bees. They got it done. Your bees are dying too. Anyone talking about it? The United States isn't even willing to discuss it at this point. This is how insane we are. And the truth of the matter is, you're willing to believe that you need dairy for this because somebody conned you when you were a little girl or a little boy. And they've actually brainwashed the poor doctors and the nutritionists and everyone else. And every one of the thousands, tens of thousands of people I've seen get better living the way we are, we take them off meat, we take them off dairy. And the side effect of this, by the way, is you don't age the way everyone else does. Remember this. You may be fighting a disease now. That's wonderful, but let's get over that quick. 2 years of doing what you should be, you'll get over a disease. If you really get your head together, that's number one. You do everything we're talking about, within 2 years, you have the potential, enormous potential to reverse your disease. Now let's get on with our life at that point. Let's get on with our life. And our life should be what again? Contributing. And the only thing you are going to be good at contributing is what you love to do. So find what you love to do, contribute that, and the day you die, and let's hope it's a good old age, and you don't do it in pain, suffering, and hooked up to a machine, that you can say, I've done something, I'm fulfilled, I've given. Milk builds strong bones. Adverts were illegalized because their claims exceed the benefits. 2 major things happened. In my country, my colleague Dr. Neil Bernard, an advocate for plant-based diet, successfully sued the dairy industry because they had bogus ads in Canada, the United States, and Britain that said if you drink milk, you'll lose weight. Let me put that in perspective for you. When I weighed 120 pounds more than I do now, you want me to repeat that? When I weighed 120 pounds more than I do now. When I gave up meat, I lost weight. When I gave up dairy, it was like somebody took a pin and stuck it in the side of a balloon. Boom! It went down like, whoop! I lost weight, my head was spinning. I lost weight so quick. So he successfully sued them and prevented them from saying that bogus, insane thing. You want to get fat, take dairy. That I can tell you. You want to get cancer, you want to get osteoporosis, take dairy. Number two, you see up here, they stopped them in almost all countries around the world, certainly in your country, from advertising that you get calcium from dairy. Now, how many of you realize that the calcium that a calf requires, who's going to become a 1,000-pound creature, is a radically different calcium than what you get from mother's milk or green plants? Calcium was discovered at the University of California by two scientists, Evans and Bishops, in 1933 on a green leafy plant. Recognize it, not in a cow's milk. Now, if somebody had a little common sense, and I know we lost it, you'd say, well, how the heck does the calcium get into the cow's milk? Anyone ever notice what a cow does all day long? I can take you right out here. You don't have to walk that far to show you. I know we haven't acknowledged that. Some of us are 89 years. Yeah, I've occasionally seen a cow, you know. Watch what the damn things are doing. Watch what a horse is doing. That's, you know, it's just amazing to me. Truth about dairy. It would be hard to imagine a worse vehicle for delivering calcium to the human body. Look at it. I said to a lad back there I was talking to, I said, remember when we were kids, we used to use Elmer's glue? What do you think Elmer's glue is? All they do is boil milk. They boil it to the point it's so sticky that you literally can stick things together with it. I used to eat Elmer's glue. Probably I was malnourished. My mother used to accuse me of eating dirt. When I got older, I came back and said, since you didn't feed me, I had to. But when you think about this, think of all the insane things that we do. Yeah, I'm home drinking, you know, 1 liter or 2 liters of milk a day, washing down cake, and using Elmer's glue at school and never putting those two things together. Did any of you ever put that together? No. Because powers that be don't want you to put things together. If you put things together, you go on strike. You'd immediately say, what, are you crazy? I'm going to take these drugs that may kill me? I'm going to eat food that is deadly, that clogs my veins, clogs my arteries, feeds disease? I'm going to age prematurely? That's what you'd say. This is a great picture. Lifting weight builds strong bones. So what is the #1 cure for osteoporosis? You see it there. How do I know this without any question? So I've worked with 20,000 people with osteoporosis. 95% were what? Women. Now why do women get osteoporosis more than men? Anyone have that idea? Not that men do not get it. Why do women? You have any concept? Because you have bones that need to be stronger than ours. You carry other human beings around. So your structure needs to be much more dense, much more developed on a bone level than a male. Parts of your body require massive amounts of structural bone. And throughout human history, certainly in the farming and before that when we were nomadic, we all lifted weight. It was not an optional thing. Do you want to go to the gym today? No. Do you want to survive today? That was the question. If you wanted to survive, you lifted weight. There wasn't something called a carriage. When you had a baby, what do you do with a baby? There wasn't something called a car. When you wanted to collect water 5 miles away, how did you get it? You follow what I'm saying? I always say this, my grandmother, Gertie, she had bigger biceps than I have now, and I lift heavy weights. Why? She refused to let us buy an electric washing machine for her. Little Gertie would be down in the basement, cursing all along, you know, with that washboard like this. Every day, 2 hours. And then she'd also do stretching exercise. Remember that? We used to actually hang clothes outside. They smelled good. Now what do you put on it? You put cloth softener on it that has 2 or 3 heavy metals in it. Mercury, lead, and an array of 6 to 8 different chemicals. So you want to not have osteoporosis, you give up milk, and you start doing weightlifting exercise. And if a doctor doesn't tell you this, they're incompetent. Matter of fact, when I used to say this, when at medical conferences 20, 30, 40 years ago, they used to only throw tomatoes at me. And then all at once they started to realize as people got more and more obese, wait a minute, these really sick women who are obese eating nothing but junk food, they don't have osteoporosis. But these little skinny girls who are doing aerobic exercise 10 hours a day, they all come here with osteoporosis. So bingo, they got it. Now, I'm not saying get fat not to get osteoporosis. You can get fat, you get cancer and other things, heart disease, diabetes. But the fact of the matter is you want to be a little skinny thing doing exercise, but doing weightlifting. You don't want to carry weight to do weightlifting. Juices, energy, and keeps you slim. Now, this is really one of the great ways to do it. For 40 years now, I've been fasting 1 or 2 days a week on juices. There is nothing better than this. One thing we know ever since Cornell in 1935 did the first of 3,000 international studies is that when you take the highest nutritional foods in the smallest amount, you live the longest and have the least disease. I'll repeat this so you get it. There has never been a study done anywhere on the planet Earth since 1935, starting at Cornell, that didn't conclude the same thing when they looked at high nutrition, low amounts. Every study, over 3,000, said people who eat the highest nutritious food in the smallest quantity live the longest and have the least disease. Would juicing help that? You bet. And what we see at Hippocrates every single week, 52 weeks a year, decade after decade, when people come in who were avid, insane overeaters like I used to be. I used to eat 1 meal a day from the time I got up to the time I went to bed. Now I eat 1 meal a day. That's how I ate, because I was malnourished. So all I wanted to do was get sugar in me to give me pseudo-energy, and then when it crashed, I needed more sugar and pseudo-energy, and then it crashed and you needed more sugar, and that's how your body goes. And sometimes you do it on spuds, and sometimes you do it on pasta, and sometimes you do it on whole grain bread. But that's what most people do. It's a cycle of deception where you're eating and stuffing your body full of junk, but none of it's nourishment. The reality is, at Hippocrates, these severe overeaters come in on a Monday, they're freaking out, oh my God, I have to eat this food. By Tuesday, Wednesday, inevitably, every group says to us, how is it I'm not hungry? You know why? Because if you take the right ingredients and put those in those juices like sprouts, you're going to freak out because your blood sugar is going to completely regulate. You're going to be so nourished. What I give you in one green juice that Bernadette will teach you here is a protein the average Irish person gets in 3 days. And we're telling you to take 2 or 3 of these. And one thing we know is why you're overeaters is you're starving. And your blood sugar is going up and down. And protein is what fixes that. Not maybe, it does. Now I wish I knew that when I was severely obese. I was bordering around morbidly obese. And the reality is, protein is what corrects that. And when you eat candy bars and agave syrup and all this nonsense that you think is healthy and honey, bottom line is, take the protein. It's going to take away that constant need you have to get pseudo-energy for short periods of time. Enzymes that are in this are easily absorbed and reach down to cellular level within 15 minutes to nourish and enhance growth of healthy cells. Again, goes back to digestibility, the very first thing we spoke about. I don't care how much nutrition it has in it, how quick can you get it? If you can take 3 times the protein and stick it in your body and get it in 15 minutes, do you know how remarkable that is for you? Where you've been sticking animal foods into your body, it spends 3 days there, leaves massive deposits of waste behind, and doesn't give you complete protein. And what do? You need more of that then. Because again, this constant, perpetual starving. And I didn't recognize this, that why I was an overeater is I was starving. But I want you to give that some pretty serious thought tonight. Juices clean the colon. I know one thing, every morning I get up and within an hour or so I take about 1.5 liters of juice. And I know where I am sitting every morning, how about you? If I keep this up, they're going to put me in the category of a horse, I think. And that's how it should be. And that colon's important because that's the dispensing duct. You know, the rest of your body, the digestive tract, the elimination canal, is where the nutrition comes out, goes into the cell, and the fiber and the water out the front, fiber out the back comes. And you don't want a lot sitting in that colon for a long time because even the best food is going to eventually become septic, become bad for you. So you want high amounts of fluid. And with these green juices, not sugar juices, not carrots, not beets, not fruit juices, but these green juices with high mineral content, they're going to activate the electrolytes in the cells, bring peristaltic action, and have you go on under normal circumstance. Wheatgrass is a miracle. I mean, we didn't come up with wheatgrass. If you go back to the ancients, in China they were using wheatgrass. In Judeo-Christian theology, the Essenes, the tribe that Jesus was born to, that Mary and Joseph were part of, were using wheatgrass. And the reality is, we've known about this for millennia. And the fact is, thank God Ann Wigmore, our founder, had more common sense than 20 of us put together. You know why? She didn't have any intellect, thank God. So she came from a place of instinct and common sense. And she said, well, you know, I live in a very cold place where I can't grow things for a good part of the year. How am I going to get this? And she read about wheatgrass. And she said, my God, in the middle of a snowstorm, in the middle of January, in my kitchen window, I can grow this grass in 7 days. And then when she found out why biblically they called wheat the staff of life, she was stopped. So when you were a kid, back in high school, you learned about something called the periodic tables or the elemental tables. And as of now, we know of 115 elements that make up the universe as we understand it. You follow that? Everything you see, you, the chair, every part of the building, outside, the trees, 115 elements or combinations of those. If a food has 20